Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we are joined by legendary drummer from System of a Down and founder of Torpedo Comics, John Dolmayan. John, welcome to the show. Obviously, want to talk to you a little bit about your career and how everybody knows you, but really want to talk about who you are. You are Armenian. You were born in Lebanon. Tell me a little bit about your background and kind of how we got to where you are today.
It's a pretty long story, so cut me off if it gets too long. I was born in Lebanon in 1972 during the civil war that was taking place in Lebanon, and it became a very dangerous place. And one night while I was in bed, I started crying for one reason or another, and my parents took me out of the bed to comfort me. And then within a few moments, there was a large shell that came through the wall and pretty much through my pillow of my bed.
God.
And so the next morning, my father brought my grandfather up. And just to take a couple of steps back, my father was a jazz musician in Lebanon who actually started on the drums as well, playing in like funeral marching bands and those types of things. And then he developed his love for the clarinet and then eventually the saxophone. And
I played the clarinet too, just going to throw it out there.
My dad started with the clarinet as far as the non-drums. So
okay.
So eventually he became more and more immersed in the jazz culture and started playing live gigs and everything. And he actually got accepted to Berklee School of Music in I think it's in Boston, if I'm not mistaken. It's not the Berklee on the West Coast. And my grandfather, in the hopes of keeping him in Lebanon, he didn't want his youngest son to leave, and he bought him Alfa Romeo at the time.
Wow.
And that kept my dad in Lebanon. Basically, he didn't take off.
Solid.
A few years later, he got married. But he always had intentions of leaving because he loved jazz so much. He wanted to come to the birthplace of jazz, which is the United States, of course. And so this was something that I think my dad took as a sign. And at this point, he's married. He's got one kid. My mom was pregnant with my sister. And it was a very difficult time in Lebanon.
Yeah.
There were attacks every single day. There were people that we knew that were shot. It was not uncommon to go outside and see dead bodies. So these were the times that we lived in, and my dad brought my grandfather up to the bedroom, and he said, "Look at the bed where my son would have been sleeping, just minutes before." And my grandfather went and got $3,000 and gave it to my dad and said, "Leave." And it was very difficult for them to have this parting because my father was extremely attached to his parents.
Yeah.
And they were extremely attached to me. And I was named after my grandfather. So it was a difficult time for them. But what ended up happening is we sought asylum during that time and ended up in Canada. Most of my family ended up in the United States. We ended up in Canada. And after a brief, like 4 years there, it may have just been a little too cold for us. So
I understand. I couldn't do it either. Man.
Yeah. I have a tough time with the cold myself. Although I'm getting a little more accepting of like the middle, like maybe a little bit of rain and not so hot would be nice too, living in Las Vegas.
This is how you know we're getting old, when we start saying stuff like that, John. Oh my gosh.
I don't want to be outside ever, but that
I'm a Cancer, oh man, I always want to be outside. So you moved from Lebanon to Canada, and then you ended up at some point in America, right?
Yes, we ended up visiting some family in California in January, which was a big mistake. Because if you want to stay in Canada, the best way to stay in Canada is to never leave Canada during the winter to temperate climates.
Right.
Because when you go there, you're like, what am I doing here?
Wow, yeah.
And we ended up moving. We came to the United States illegally.
Oh.
And but we worked. We never got government assistance. We paid our dues. My parents didn't speak English when they went to the United States, but my mom ended up graduating from college and becoming a teacher. My dad he cut hair during the day and he played music at night. He worked 7 days a week. He's my biggest inspiration as far as work ethic and family values and how important our family was to him, because while my sister and I and my mom would enjoy the pool on a Sunday, my dad was leaving the house at 1 in the afternoon in a tuxedo to go make a couple hundred more bucks so that he can give us a little bit of a better life.
Amazing.
So, and that's something that always stuck with me, is that him walking out of the house with his saxophone case and a tuxedo on a Sunday afternoon, and he never had a day off, so
Right.
I admire him greatly. And my mom, the same thing, put herself through college, worked 2 jobs, worked at a school, and fortunately, once system became more prominent and we had a little bit more money, I was able to buy them a house, buy them new cars, which they hadn't had before, and try to give back a little bit to them who have sacrificed everything for us, me and my sister. But
Absolutely.
that's what led me to California, and California was a very different place back then.
Yes.
You're talking about Reagan era California,
Mhm.
where Reagan was just the governor of California, and
Right.
he had just become president, and it was just a completely different time, right? Like the philosophies were different, and it was a very nice place to grow up, and I had a lot of good memories and fond memories of California, Southern California. Eventually, the band. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you about drumming. Obviously, your dad was a musician, so that was sort of in your blood. From what I understand, you liked playing the drums from a very young age, and it seems like, is that something that you just kind of did on your own? And did you have any formal, practice of that, or were you just kind of doing this out on your own? And how did you end up with such a successful band? Like, how'd you get there?
Well, that's another. All of these could be just one interview. Like every part of
Wow,
this,
what
right?
a life, John.
So, how did I get into drums? That's a very good question. I like to think that I've been a drummer my whole life. When I was 2 years old, remember that Alfa Romeo we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
My dad got goaded into staying in Lebanon for. Well, I used to sit in the middle console of that car as a 3-year-old little kid, and my dad would play Chicago's album number 7, which, if you're familiar with Chicago, is kind of an avant-garde album that Chicago made, one of my favorites. And I used to mimic the drummer the entire time. And sometimes my mom would take me to an event that my dad was playing at. He used to play a lot of Armenian weddings, and he used to play for actually the American Embassy in Lebanon and different
Wow.
things. And occasionally we're invited as well. And I would always make my way to the stage as a 3-year-old kid, and I would just mimic the drummer at the front of the stage. And people were dancing and enjoying themselves. And I remember the women would look at me and think it was cute and everything. And all I could think of was like, this is what I want to be doing, even from that age. It did take me a little bit of time to convince my parents to get me a drum set, because, as many of you know, there are a lot of pitfalls in being a musician and choosing to lead that lifestyle. They didn't know it at the time, but I wasn't going to succumb to any of those pitfalls. It just wasn't in my nature to. I wanted to play music purely for the joy of playing music. I
Well,
didn't
and
care
it's
about.
hard. It's hard to be successful in the music industry, It's, let alone be the type of musician that you were, to end up in an incredibly successful band that won a Grammy, to be known all around the world. I mean, that's pretty amazing that you went from Lebanon, where obviously you as a baby were almost killed, to being the super successful drummer that you ultimately became. I mean, do you sit back and think about that sometimes, like how incredible that is?
It's surreal in a lot of ways, and
Yeah,
incredibly difficult to achieve.
yeah,
Not only do you have to be in the right place at the right time, you have to hone your abilities, your talent. You have to work incredibly hard. You have to be willing to put in the same amount of time it takes to become a doctor or an attorney or a successful businessman with absolutely no hope of even making a living. I mean, it's one of the stupidest things you can pursue in life, but one of the most rewarding, whether you achieve success or not.
right.
And, we're on rarefied earth here when you're thinking about a band on the level of System of a Down. And also keeping in mind that we're 4 Armenian people that came together from completely
Yeah,
different walks of life. Darren was born in Hollywood. His parents originated from Iraq. Our bass player Shavo was born in Armenia. Serge was also born in Lebanon, but older, and they left much earlier. So completely different. And then I ended up in Canada and still found my way to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Played in other bands from the age of 15 to like 22, and then somehow connected with these guys. We started.
How did that happen? How did you guys end up together?
Well, you date a lot when it comes to musicians. And what I mean by that is you play with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And, you find out who you're compatible with. Some people, you play with them and you learn, you grow. Sometimes you outgrow each other. But more often than not, what ends up happening is people that are pursuing anything in the arts, or, for example, if you wanted to become a football player, to equate it a little bit differently, it's kind of the same path, right? It's the same struggle. You put in all this effort. You have the talent. For one reason or another, you get an injury at the wrong time, or you're with the wrong band, or whatever the case may be. It just doesn't happen for you. And that's usually the process, right? I think there's like 14 or 1,700 NFL players. Well, there's a lot less when you're talking about musicians on our level.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about the chances of making it are in the billions.
Right.
And then you bring together 4 Armenians. And what's an Armenian? This is before Kim Kardashian, was prominent, and Andre Agassi has Agassi as last name, so nobody knew he was Armenian. Cher was known as Cher. Nobody knew she was Armenian. There were a lot of prominent Armenians, but because of maybe the way society viewed us, or probably more likely because Armenia was viewed as a part of communist Russia for so long, it wasn't something that was really public. And we had to actually make a decision back in 97 of whether or not we're going to keep our last names the way they were, which are all Armenian last names, because it was going to give us yet another hurdle. And of course, being who we are, we decided we're not going to, I said, I'm not going to change who we are. As it is, my name's not even John. That's just a translation of my name. And
what's your Armenian name?
It's Hovig, H-O-V-I-G.
But that's basically means John.
Okay. John the Baptist.
Okay.
It translates to that.
Interesting.
Armenians are the first Christian race. I don't know if too many people know that. We've been persecuted for it ever since, but that's another topic that we'll get into.
It's another show we're going to have to do. Well, I have to ask you, though, obviously you became so incredibly successful. You are part of, as you say, such an exclusive group. But within the exclusive group of musicians and Hollywood and celebrity, people don't often speak out whenever they have an opinion or a thought that might differ from the mainstream. John, you've been very different. I mean, you've sort of been out there with the fact that you have values that don't necessarily align with what so many in Hollywood kind of try to push you into. Why have you been that forthcoming? Was there something that happened where you said, I can't take being silent anymore? Or why weren't you afraid of being canceled? Because so many people are.
It might be that I'm just not smart enough to know to do what is in my best interest. It could be that I read a lot about McCarthyism in the 50s, and I found that to be abhorrent. Part of being a citizen of the United States is believing in the Constitution. It's our not only our right, but also our responsibility to adhere to those tenements. And whenever I see someone ostracized or demonized for their views, I just think back to what our founding fathers intended for us.
Right.
And that was for us to have the freedom to have differing views and to have civil discussions about those views and maybe gain perspective of somebody has an opposing view. And, as much as I found McCarthyism to be abhorrent, I also find that what's happening now with cancel culture to be equally abhorrent. And I think that later on, when the dust settles, people will look back at it and view it in the same way they did McCarthyism. And part of being an American, as far as I'm concerned, is being able to fight for someone's right to try to make America communist. That's part of the deal here.
Yeah.
America isn't supposed to be easy, right? Like
Right.
we have the best situation in the world if you really think about it. I don't care what anybody says.
Totally.
You don't want to live anywhere but here, I assure you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best. Everything else there's a lot of other good stuff out there. You want to live in Norway, go ahead. But if the United States doesn't exist, there is no Norway. It's called China or Russia.
Exactly. That's right.
And you're seeing some of that happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always believed in standing up for the weak, the disenfranchised, and System of a Down, in my opinion, stood for that in a lot of ways. Now, clearly, Serge, the singer, and I, who, by the way, we're brother-in-laws, we married two sisters.
Love it.
Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine gave them a moniker, which is kind of funny, and it's called Sisters of a Down because we're System of a Down.
Love it.
Which is pretty good. Should be a t-shirt, maybe.
Yeah.
We have differing opinions. I don't know if you know, but I was a tremendous supporter of President Trump.
We appreciate that.
I loved what he stood for. I love the fact that he wasn't coming from the place that every other politician is coming from. Not that I don't respect politicians. There are many good politicians out there, but they're all a part of the same system.
That's it. Yeah.
And that system has a lot of flaws that need to be fixed and repaired. And unfortunately, I don't believe that most politicians even believe in what they're saying. It's about getting reelected. It's about lining their pockets, taking gigs one way or the other. And I understand that this is the system that we live in, and until we find a better one, this is going to be it. But when you have somebody coming in that has absolutely everything to lose and puts it on
and did lose a lot, by the way.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
I don't doubt it. He was beloved. And, at least, I don't know, at least 40% of the country made him into a villain for a long time. And however you feel about Biden or anybody else, I believe that you have to respect whoever's in office.
Agreed. Totally agree. Yeah.
And when Biden got elected, I gave him my full support because at the end of the day, I want the country to be successful. Because if the country isn't successful, people pay the price for it. And it's not going to be me. I already made my money.
Right.
It's not going to be you. It's going to be the common person that is paying almost $7 a gallon in LA for gas right now. They're the ones
John, yeah, and it's happening. I mean, you see exactly why. And obviously, we know who I voted for. Obviously, we know who I wanted to win the 2020 election. But you're right. Whoever is in charge of America, we should all, as American citizens, rally behind and say, let's hope that this individual is successful, because if they are successful, then Americans will inherently get some of that success. And now you see, whenever that person fails, how bad it can be and how quickly it can turn. And honestly, it's really frightening to see how quickly things can change if you don't have good leadership and if that person isn't successful. And as someone who came from a war-torn country to, Canada and then America, I mean, you must see some of these images coming from Ukraine and be able to commiserate with these people. I mean, does it remind you of kind of where you came from originally?
What actually reminds me of about a year and a half ago when Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Syrian mercenaries, as well as some other people, attacked my people, the indigenous people in Artsakh. And I mean, think about what we're dealing with here. You have a nation, Armenia, which is comprised of about, 2.8 million people, fighting a combined weight of, over 100 million people.
Yeah.
With a lot of U.S. backed money and Western interests being involved. And Azerbaijan took advantage of presidential election and COVID to attack a peaceful people. We've never wanted war. We've only defended ourselves, and we're a small tribe living in the area that's trying to survive. So I completely understand what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Although although I have my issues with Ukraine and their support of Azerbaijan during the war on Artsakh and Armenia, the people are never to blame in these situations. Governments
Right.
make their decisions, and I have empathy for them. And I would want that situation to be resolved as peaceably as possible. Although I do see reasons for it, and you know, I'm not a politician or a global leader to make decisions. But at the end of the day, I don't want to see kids fearing for their lives,
Oh,
because there are kids that are dying there now, and that could easily have happened to me.
yeah.
You know,
I mean,
not,
it almost did,
it
right?
almost did. So,
Yeah.
fortune could have favored someone else that day, but it favored me, and because of that, I'm here to talk to you. And I'm hoping that, also, you're when we go to war, people lose their fathers. People lose their mothers, and they don't come back.
Right.
Now they have to live their life, the only life they're given, without that structure, without that person in their lives to create memories. There's nothing that comes out of this that's positive, even though a lot of these things occur for uh, global political reasons. At the end of the day, it's all about money, and
Yes.
resources, and that's what
Absolutely.
we fight each other for. At the end of the day, like, what difference does it make, really, at the end of the day, if there's a border here or a border there? These are all things that we create. But at the end of the day, also, I can argue both points. You lock your door for a reason tonight.
Right. Well,
You
I
don't
got to tell
somebody can,
you, John, I asked you, why you spoke out and why you felt comfortable enough to really share your views openly. And you said, maybe I'm not smart enough to know not to do it. You're very smart. Obviously, you've read a lot. You know history. You are, very well spoken. But I want to get your take on this because I think it's really interesting. Back in the day, and I don't want to stereotype here, but it used to be that like punk rock, heavy metal musicians were all about anti-establishment, not trusting the government and that sort of thing. Yet today, when it comes to anyone that is in the industry, right, it's almost as though they have to conform in a way. Otherwise, like, they're just discarded or canceled or whatever you want to say. How did we switch that? How did that get flipped around? Because it really does feel like things have gone in the opposite direction of how they used to be like 30 years ago.
things are always going to switch, and you might have a generation that comes in 5 years that looks at things completely differently, that looks at social media differently, and social media could be a lot less significant in 5 years, or it could be more
God,
significant.
I hope
Think,
less.
well, there's a lot of positive that can come from it as well,
True.
but at the end of the day, it feeds off your ego, and it's insatiable, and so is everybody's ego. Everybody wants to feel important and be important. The thing is that they don't realize they are, and as long as you are to yourself, and you have that self validation, and you don't really need anyone else's. And sometimes it takes people a long time to gain that wisdom and that internal knowledge. Some people never gain it,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, you know um, we all have our things with Instagram and Facebook and whatever, TikTok, whatever you're on. I try to keep it just to Instagram, because at least there's some funny memes on there occasionally that I enjoy.
I like pictures. That's
Pictures
why
and
I like
videos.
Instagram. Yeah, totally.
But going back to, whether or not I'm intelligent or not, I I have an intelligence, but I find it really difficult to keep my mouth shut when I see injustice.
Yeah.
And I find what's happening to conservatives to be, you know, completely opposite with justice, completely opposite with understanding and compassion, where we are um, being victimized by people that should be there to protect you, news agencies, every social media platform having one thought process, Google having one thought process. And the question I like to raise to people is, at the end of the day, if the richest and biggest corporations think one way, shouldn't you at least research the other way of thinking? Because they're going to do
Right.
things that are in their own self-interest.
Of
And
course.
you know, just because they have an interesting name, or an aim you think you can get behind, in a slogan, doesn't mean that it's a good thing. And look into who the people are that they build these organizations off of, and
Yeah,
try to look into a little bit deeper so you gain a little bit of perspective, and be open to other people's opinions, and look, I've
absolutely.
done myself no service. I took a lot of flack. I lost a lot of followers. I lost financial opportunities, and primarily because I supported Donald Trump as president, because he was my president. I voted for him twice, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I'd vote for him again. I will vote for him again if he runs. I hope he does. You know,
Well, stay
and
tuned.
I hope he does. You have my support. And the
Thank
reason
you.
why is because I think he's doing things for the right reasons. I do wish selfishly that he would show a little more love to Armenia and Artsakh and our situation there. I don't believe that Turkey is a real ally to the United States, and I think in time we're going to learn that. I just hope we don't learn a hard lesson. And they've been trying to wipe out my people for over 105 years or so now, and they killed 1.5 million of us during the Armenian genocide, which recently the United States has finally admitted happened. It only took 100 years. And, we've been fighting for that since the beginning of System of a Down. So the dichotomy of the band, there are very different opinions there,
Yeah, I'm sure.
and
What's been the reaction? Like, what was the initial reaction whenever you kind of voiced your support for Donald Trump?
I did get advice from a few of my band members and my manager and my wife especially, that was like, look, maybe it's not the best idea to put all these views out there. And my answer to them was, I supported my singer in everything he's ever said, although I didn't always agree with everything he's ever said. And I just want the same respect back now. I'm
Right.
not saying that he shouldn't have a right to his opinions. What I'm saying is there are kids in schools, and they're young, they're impressionable, and there are kids that think the way I think, and they're alone for the most part because the opinion is swayed the other way. Teachers are swayed the other way. Your educators, the people around you. I mean, you're indoctrinated from a very young age in this country at this point, right now. Like what we're dealing with right now, today.
Absolutely.
And who's speaking for those kids who are sitting there feeling like they're wrong, but they can't help the way they think? Who are they looking at and saying, well, that person agrees with me at least. I may not reach all of them, but if I reach a few of them, then that's enough for me. And if that
So
means I have to
great.
make a little bit less money, then so be it. My family isn't starving. We're doing just fine. If that means I'm going to have less opportunity, so be it.
But
But
John, at least you can go to bed at night knowing that who you truly are and how you truly feel is, you can be that person. You don't have to hide it. I think a lot of people probably feel like they have to hide it because they don't have the option. Their last name isn't Trump like mine. I mean, we know where I stand. They don't have the success that you've had. But you're right. I'm sure the fact that there is somebody out there that they can say, well, hey, I mean, at least I'm not alone. At least there are other people. And there are so many other people. The one thing I constantly hear, and I find it so interesting, my husband and I had to go get some cough medicine for our son at CVS last night, right? And we're talking like 8:30 at night in CVS. And this woman came up and she was so excited, but she was like whispering. And she's like, I love you guys. I'm like, God, the fact that this lady feels like she has to whisper. I live in Florida. Like, we're in good space here. But she said, there are so many people that support you out there. You have no idea. And everybody basically has their own version of that.
it's hard to take a stand, right?
Yeah,
Most people are just trying to earn a living, take care of their families, give their kids a little bit of a better life than they had, and that's their focus, trying to stay on top of credit card bills and their
right.
mortgage or rent or whatever it is. And all I can say is that if enough people are quiet, really bad things tend to happen if you look back at history. But if enough people are vocal, temporarily it could get bad, but eventually it's always better. And that
Right.
was the case for us declaring independence from the tyranny of English rule and forming our own country. That was a hard thing to do, but really strong individuals knew that it was the right thing to do, and they sacrificed their kids, they sacrificed themselves, they sacrificed their businesses. And for the short term, it was very hard for them, but they did it because for the long term, it was the right thing to do.
Right.
And imagine if that had not, if all those people weren't willing to die to end slavery. Imagine what the United States would look like today.
Absolutely.
You know, people lost their entire families during those battles. You know, imagine if people had stood up a little bit more in Turkey. The Armenian genocide may never have happened. Imagine 20 years later if people remembered how difficult it was to kill the Armenians. Maybe 6 million people wouldn't have been killed during the Holocaust, and another 100 million people killed during the war in general. Imagine if more people had stood up against the evils of communism. Maybe 100 million people would have been saved between Russia and China. You know, so we're not always strong as human beings. Sometimes we just go with the flow, you know, but if enough of us speak up, we will dam the river. And that's what it takes sometimes.
I hear it. And I love it. And I love that there are people that have the guts, quite frankly, to get out there and say it and do it, because I think it inspires other people. And so that's always the hope, is that enough people want the right things to happen and aren't quiet and really get out in front of it. I ask everybody, John, this question. I want to ask you, what do you think is the best part of America, and what do you think is the biggest threat to the future of our country?
I think the best part of America is that we have the right and freedom to pursue our dreams whichever way we want. And whether we succeed or fail, we have the ability to pursue those dreams. And you can see that people achieve amazing things coming from meager originations, you know, and everybody has the opportunity to do that, especially now more than ever. Everybody has an equal opportunity to pursue something that they want to do. And by the way, achieving your dreams doesn't mean that you become wealthy or that you own a business or whatever the case may be. It's whatever you want to do for yourself. It's however you see your life unfolding.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, you only get one shot at it. So give it the best you can while you can, and be satisfied with what you get. As long as you put your effort into it, it's 100% of your effort, you have nothing to lose.
That's right.
Because you will sleep very soundly the rest of your life, irrespective of your level of success. What was the second?
What do you think is the biggest threat to the future of our country?
I think that the biggest threat to the future of this country is the present system of government, where they fight each other. You know, from the second somebody achieves the presidency to the second they're out, they're fighting each other, not pursuing anything positive. It's destroying this country. It's divided. It's already divided this country. We have to figure out how to bring it back. I might have a simple solution. I don't know. I don't know if anybody will listen, but maybe. I don't know if this will work, but maybe the president, when the president gets into office, whether they're Democrat or Republican, maybe they have a cabinet that is 50% Democrat and 50% Republican, so that you can always get differing views, and you can think how somebody that thinks completely different than you views something that you're trying to implement into society. Because you, as president, your responsibility is to think for everybody in the country and to try to benefit everyone in the country, not just for the people that voted for you.
Yeah, you know, so, absolutely. Well, we're supposed to have a system that works like that in Congress, but to a degree, but.
Well, you know, they're so busy trying to get reelected that they forget.
That's right.
To serve the people.
What do you think of term limits?
I think they should be a lot stricter.
Yeah,
I don't think the president should have a term limit, because as long as they're doing a great job and they want to reelect the president, they should be able to reelect them.
The one that has a term limit, you don't think? Well, I mean, but you look at people that have been in the game and in the system for their entire life. I mean, our current president obviously has been a lifelong politician. Look at people like Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, these folks, what are they doing that's positive? They all have mansions. How did they get their money? Nothing good comes from any of it.
Everybody knows how they get their money.
Yeah, of course.
And I get it. You know, like when you get put into these positions of power, it's very hard to ignore the information that you have. It's very hard not to take advantage of it. It's just human nature. But maybe part of the problem is we scrutinize people so much that are trying to come from a different place into politics. I'm completely unelectable. And the reason why is once people start prying into my life and go 20 years, 30 years back, I'm a rock musician on tour.
Yeah.
You're not going to like everything I've done in my life. You know, I've never had a problem with anyone. I've always treated people with respect. But I was also 21 years old at one point, and my goal was not to become a lifelong politician, nor was I ever in law school.
Right.
You know, we need to go back to common man, bakers.
Well, that's how the system was supposed to be set up, right? That was.
Not.
I know.
It's not. So we need to reflect on what the system is now. I also think that we need to get rid of lobbyists completely. Oh. There should be no lobbyists in this country. You should not, as a candidate, be able to buy airtime on networks. There are simple solutions that will take some of the money out of it. You know, I don't know, maybe you have people that become professional congressmen, senators, judges, whatever the case may be. Maybe there is a professional aspect to it where, kind of like the priesthood, you give up worldly possessions, you know, so that you don't have a bank account.
We would have no one at the Capitol right now, John, if that was the case. Could you imagine any of these people giving up all of their worldly possessions? Please, we might have three people in there.
Or maybe, maybe 3 people is all we need if they're the right 3 people.
Could be.
You know? The problem is that somebody that hasn't run a business has no clue how to run a business.
Right.
And trust me, I have 50 employees. It is incredibly difficult to make ends meet. And I provide full health care for everybody. I take care of people when they need to, you know, deal with life issues. I help people get cars if they need help getting cars. I'm a very good person to work for, and I adore the people that work with me here at the company. But
we didn't even talk about about the comments. We didn't even talk about your company. I feel like we need to have you back, John, to really get a download on everything. But
I'd love to talk as much as you want. I understand that, you know, we may be limited today, but we can always do this again.
Well, maybe I hope get a better connection. Yeah, I hope so. And listen, I just honestly, on behalf of half the country, quite frankly, and probably more, want to say thank you for really speaking out and being such a strong voice for those out there that really don't feel like they can say what they're thinking and have to hide who they are and conceal their true thoughts, you know, for fear of what might happen to them. Thank you for being a great supporter of my father-in-law. I won't break any news, but we may see around 3. I don't know for sure. I can't confirm or deny that. But we would love to have your vote if my father-in-law runs again. Thank you, though, for everything you've done, for standing up and speaking out. And
very welcome, and thank you for having me. It's been a really fun conversation.
We'll have you back for more. Yeah,
anytime.
I want to find out more.
By the way, if you guys end up coming out to Vegas anytime soon, please let me know. I'd love to show you my my comic book store I
love it. Amazing.
There's, you know, give you guys some stuff for the kids, and I'll leave you with this. You know, I'm artistic in nature, and the way I think is, generally speaking, artistic. So because of that, I also am an emotional person and all that. So all I think of is, at the end of the day, one day I'm going to be lying on a bed and I'm going to die. And I'm hoping that if I'm the man that I should be, I will be surrounded by my children and my loved ones. And when I pass, they will have fond memories of a person that they respected, who always stood up for what they thought was right, even when they were wrong. But when they were wrong, they were always willing to look at other perspectives. And I wish that more people would have that philosophy, because at the end of the day, no matter what we do, it's about the next generation or the generation after them. It's not about it.
So true. That's what it's all about. Well, John Dolmayan, thank you for being here. Thanks for coming on The Right View. We'll check back with you again soon. And to everybody at home, as always, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View.